protagonistas.com.
Buenas noches, gente, buenas noches a protagonistas del cómic número 39, a un pasito de los 40, con otro gran programa que no lo haría sin mi colega, el señor Mario Luzuriaga.
¿Cómo le va, mi querido amigo? Qué feliz, ya estamos a punto de los 40, ¿eh? A punto.
A punto de los 40.
Sí.
Vamos a hacer... Vamos a hablar en inglés en esta entrevista, como hacemos habitualmente, así que vamos a presentar a nuestro invitado sin mucho más vueltas, porque la verdad que es otro gran invitado de la Superman Family.
Qué lujo.
We're going to introduce one of the greatest artists of the Superman Family, especially one of the artists behind Superman and the death of Superman. He's the one and only Mr. Bread Breathing.
Hey, how you doing?
How you doing,
Mr.
sir?
Breathing.
Very good. Nice to see you all.
Yeah, me too, sir.
You're down in Argentina, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Exactly, sir. We're from
Hello
Argentina.
to everybody in Argentina.
South of the border.
Yes.
I always love to say south of the border.
I've been near there, but I've never been there.
Oh.
You've been in Brazil, I think.
No. Santiago.
In Chile.
Oh, in Chile.
And Guayaquil, Ecuador. And Mexico City, but that's way north of you guys.
Yeah, yes. You were in La Mole Comic Con.
Yeah, I've done La Mole a few times. And then I did a show in Comic-Con Ecuador a few years back, and then is it Comic-Con Chile? Superfest Chile?
Yeah,
I think it's
Superfest. Yeah.
Superfest, I think.
So,
yeah, you went with John Bogdan that time or not?
No.
Okay.
Well, John, when we were in Mexico City for La Mole, we did on the 25th anniversary.
Oh.
They brought Mike Carlin, John Bogdanov, Doug Hazelwood, Dan Jurgens, and myself in for an event. Tried to get everybody, but some people didn't want to travel. Some people didn't have the time. So they got the 5 of us, and they did a big event for that. But the time that I was in Ecuador, it was just me from the Superman group. And also when I did Superfest Chile, I was the only Superman artist there. So.
You know, Mr. Breeding, the death of Superman, all the event, it's one of the most popular here in Argentina. One of the most, really the most popular here in Argentina.
Yeah, I found that it's very popular throughout South America and Mexico. It's like everything south of the border, everybody is, the fans are fantastic. They're all excited. Superman's a really big deal down there, much more so than it feels like here in the States. But everywhere I go, that's why I enjoy doing trips down there, because I always know I'm going to have a good time, and the fans are always, very nice and, very excited and really love the character.
Yeah, a few years ago, they republished the story, all the story on TPs. Mm-hmm. So it was exciting during the pandemic.
Also, here in South America, I think in worldwide, it was, but especially I think in South America, it was a point one for new readers, because it was a perfect jump point to Superman story. It was not a perfect point to know Superman because it was his death, but it was a perfect jump point, sir.
Yes, and a real start.
The story generated a lot of new readers back when it originally came out. And I think that's why it keeps being reprinted, and every new generation gets introduced to it. It really does, bring people in, and I think we did a really nice job. The stories really helped define the character and his supporting cast, and it has a happy ending. So it's a good place for readers to leave off and continue on with the character.
Mm-hmm.
And before you worked on the death of Superman, you work on Superman, and here we got some.
Oh,
You work on
yeah.
on.
Well, even going back
this,
further than that, when I started at DC in 1980, I did a lot of Superman Family with Kurt Schaffenberger and some other Superman stories. Then I went to Marvel, and then when I came back to DC about 6 or 7 years later, I started on that issue of Action Comics that's on the screen. And well, actually, take that back. I did the first Superman annual with Ron Frenz while I was still at Marvel. And then the following year, I did the second annual, which is the one on screen.
Yeah.
And then the following year, I went over to DC full time, and eventually I started on Superman with Carrie Gamble while George Perez was getting ready on Action. And then when he had the work ready to go, I jumped onto Action with George and basically was on Superman after that for about 10 years.
How was inking George Perez? Was a difficult task, or it was an easy task?
Well, the early stuff that I did with him, a Justice League 200 and a Cyborg miniseries issue, basically I was inking George's full pencils or breakdowns. I don't remember. And it was quite a lot of fun, except it's a lot of work. It's a lot of detail. But I was someone who really wanted to work with George. So I kept pestering my editors early on, when can I work with George? Because I loved his work as a fan. And, it was a lot of work, but it was very rewarding and a lot of fun. When I came over to work with him on Action, one of the reasons that I got the assignment was George didn't want to do pencils. He wanted to do a breakdown layout. So he would do like a little bit more than thumbnails, but not quite breakdowns. Some of pages were very loose, just little circles with, for a head and the name of who the character was supposed to be. And other things, he might be a Superman figure that he had more fun with, he might pencil a little tighter. But so I was brought on to finish his pencils and then ink the job. And that was a lot of work because I was trying very hard to keep the artwork up to George's level, the amount of detail, and, to keep up with him with pencils that weren't sometimes there. So it was a lot of extra work for myself. I was being compensated as half of the pencils and also as the inks. But it was a lot of work, and it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed working with George. Aside from being a terrific and wonderful person, he, and a great artist, the work was a lot of fun and very rewarding.
And also in the same time, and in another title of Superman, you were working with John Byrne. So it was that runs right, working with that kind of artist.
Well, I've never worked with John Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
John was gone from the Superman books once I came over.
When you come,
when I started, John had already moved on and was no longer one of the regular, players on the team. The people that were in place when I started were Roger Stern and Carrie Gamble, Jerry Ordway and Dennis Janke, and then myself, and initially Carrie Gamble on Superman. It was Carrie and Roger. I got to think about this. Who did these three books? Initially, I started on Carrie, but then when I moved on to Action and they brought it back, there were 3 titles. So it was me and George, it was Jerry and Dennis
and Marv Wolfman.
Roger
Marv Wolfman.
writing part. No, Marv Wolfman wasn't part of the team when I came on board. He was not on the Superman books at that time.
Then it was Roger and Stern in Adventures.
Well, Roger Stern was the writer in place on Superman when I started. And Kerry Gamble was doing the pencils. I did the inks of his first 4 issues. Then I moved on to do some fill-in stuff. Dan Jurgens came in to do a few fill-in stories while I waited for Action to be ready. And then finally, George was up and running on Action, and I jumped onto that. And at that point, there were now 3, regular monthly Superman titles.
Sir, and was that the point when you met Dan Jurgens and begin this partnership between you two?
Well, I didn't meet him at that point. I had been given an issue to do. I believe the first thing we did was an issue of Adventures of Superman as a fill-in. We ended up doing a bunch of covers, but I don't remember what came first, the covers or the book. But Mike liked the way that we were paired. But then once George's work was ready, I was on to George, and Dan was not officially a regular at that point. But he was about to be very shortly after that. And he started on Adventures of Superman as the new regular artist with Art Thibert inking it.
Art Thibert. Okay.
So at some point, George didn't want to complete he agreed to do 12 issues originally. And then after like 3 issues, he was like, I don't want to do it anymore. And Mike Carlin talked him into doing it where he did even less work, just on little thumbnails. And then they gave those thumbnails to Kerry Gamble to blow up and do loose breakdowns for me to finish. And then 3 more issues later, George said, no, I'm done. I definitely don't want to do it. So Kerry took over on Action as the penciler for, I don't remember how many issues, but for a while. And then when he left, Bob McLeod came on board. And so Bob was then the penciler on Action. And at some point, actually it was right before the issue that Superman reveals himself to Lois. Clark reveals himself to Lois. Action 662. Mike Carlin called and said, look, we're moving teams around, and I really want to move you on to Dan Jurgens on Superman. And I was like, wow, here we are. This is going to be a nice payday. This is going to be, this is going to be a big deal. I said, oh no, we've already had all the big deals. It's not going to be that big of a deal, but I really could use you over here. So I like to think I'm a team player. I said, okay, that's fine. I'll do it. So I moved over to work on Dan. And at that point, I spent the rest of my time on Superman, teamed with Dan regularly. And it was just a good matchup. It just, part of me still likes what Art Thibert did over Dan a little more than what I do, oddly enough. There's something about, he captures something from Dan's pencils. I have a tendency to, I do finishes over Dan's breakdowns. So there's more of me going into the work than I think Art was putting in. I think he was working on full pencils. I'm not sure. But our styles are very different. And it was just a style that Mike and the people at DC liked. And I think Dan was happy with it. And I was enjoying doing it. And, it just continued to work out. And so we were already paired for a couple of year and a half by the time Death of Superman started to come about.
And you had a great time, right? You got a
it was great. I mean, it was wonderful being on the Superman books the entire time. Mike Carlin created a family of creators that he included everyone in the story process. We had what we called Superman summits, once or twice a year. to flesh out stories. And Mike and DC brought everybody in. They brought in all the inkers, they brought in the colorists, all the pencilers and writers. Usually in story meetings, you're only going to get the writers and maybe sometimes the artists, but virtually never do you hear of them including the inkers and the colorists. Mike included everybody, and which was good for me because I had a lot of things that I wanted to contribute, and I was very much into it, and as were some of the other people that wouldn't normally be there. And it really, was a group of people that enjoyed, I think, hanging out together and working together. And that bonding experience makes for a better work experience. You feel vested with everyone in what you're producing. Yeah. And so you want to produce better work. You working with some of the people on those books, it also makes you lift up your game, because I'd see what Jerry Ordway was doing every month, and I go, oh man, I wish I could draw like that. And I was inspired to try to do better, or I'd see, something Kerry Gamble did, or some of the stuff John Bogdanov was doing when he finally came over to do Man of Steel. Was like, you're looking at what the other people are doing. It just is an inspiration to what you're doing yourself. And I think everybody was like that to some degree, and so you didn't want to be the weak link, you didn't want everybody to say all these Superman books are good, but that one he does, woo boy, that stinks. You want to try to be as good as what everybody else is doing. And the fact that we got along and knew each other and spent the time we did together reinforced that, I believe.
What happened with the Superman team and what you just told us about the last how the Superman team lasts for years. It's something very difficult these days because there's always this a change in, I don't know, a year or so, and you spend a lot of time together and create this bond that made the Superman books so great and so organic as a story, because they were all tied together. They felt like they
felt
were done at the same time.
Just one story.
It was something that you can realize that it was done at the same time. It was all planned. It was all calculated by a team of persons, not just a writer or an editor. It was a team of persons, and you had the chance to work, as you said, with great artists, with great people like you, and you have the chance to go to kill this character that you all love.
That wasn't always the plan. It just kind of worked out that way. But it's not something I think you'll ever see again, and I don't know if it was ever done before. Nowadays, if you see somebody on a book for 6 issues, they do these little 6-issue story arcs. I was on the books for 10 years.
Exactly.
I was, from the time I started, Roger Stern and Dennis Janke were already part of the team. They had been there before I started, and they were the other 2 people that were still on the books when I departed. So, and then of course Dan came in shortly after me. Jerry left early. Louise and John came in, a couple of years after I was already in place. So some of the people turned over, some of the books changed, but there was still a constant. And of course, Mike Carlin was my editor for the majority of all the work that I did on Superman for at least 8 years of those 10. And we didn't have any interference from the company. Nobody was like dictating, it was we'd be in the meeting, Mike would orchestrate it, but it was the creative people that would throw the ideas out. And even though there was an ongoing story arc, or a subplot that carried through all of the books, right, most frequently, there was a continuity within the books overlapping, but each team was able to still do their own individual stories that I believe a reader could read just one of the titles and they would get a good, satisfying, self-contained story that if you wanted to follow the threads to another book, you could. And that would be another level, you'd be rewarded for it because that would add another level to the experience. But if you didn't, each book still had its own individual personality, and stories that you could just collect one. We found most people, once they discovered one, they were led into the other books and realized, hey, this is a lot of fun because, it's the world of Superman every week. That was what the fourth book was about. When Man of Steel was brought in, it was so that we could have a Superman title on the stands every week. And it was amazing. I mean, Mike Carlin should get, if not all the credit, the majority of it, because he created such a good environment and brought, great people together. A lot of people that weren't being appreciated anywhere else in the industry, but were, the top of their field. And we created some, memorable books that, because we had fun, we did the books for ourselves. We weren't like, well, what do you think the fans want to see? It was like, I think this will be fun, or, oh, this is, we were doing it for ourselves with the hope. And a lot of people will say this, and I think it's very true. If you really love something and you love what you're doing and you do it for yourself, other people will love it too. Other people will find it. The people that are interested in that type of material will discover it and like it because, you really put your heart into it. You're not trying to anticipate, what people want to see or what sales will be generated or what's, popular.
And how were those reunions with
those
the team?
Meetings
and those meetings with the team, those meetings speaking about Superman's future? And I want to ask you if there was any plot, any idea that you brought in that it was used and you're proud of it.
I had a lot of little ideas, it wasn't my position. I didn't have control of a book as a writer or a co-plotter to have any real input in the overall stories, but I would come in and, I'd see something and I would throw out an idea and I'd say, oh, I think this would work. Or in the Death of Superman, I was the one that came up with the idea that, I think this would work from a pacing standpoint if we started out with the first issue in the story with 4 panels a page, and then we went to 3 panels a page, and then we go to 2 panels a page, and then in the Death of Superman we have all splash pages. It'll help accelerate the story, and and that idea came from me at a conference that John Buscema gave at Marvel, where he was talking about doing his graphic novel, The Silver Surfer, which was all splash pages. And I thought, oh boy, how much fun would it be to just be able to draw all splash pages? So when we had the Superman meeting, like within a couple of weeks of that, it was like, that maybe this is a place we could do that. And they loved the idea. I did come up with a character the idea of the character for Blaze was, I believe, Roger Stern came up with that, and they allowed me to design her and what she looked like and whatever. So that was a lot of fun. Created a couple of characters while I was there. I threw out some lines in one of the meetings that Roger Stern used for the title of the story because he liked it. George Perez's idea for our very first issue of Action, there was I talked to him before he had started on it, And I said, I knew what the first pages were because I had to do a sample. There were already, when Mike Carlin was looking for someone to ink this or to do the finished part, he had already gotten samples from a couple of other people. And he was like, well, I need to have you do samples. And so I did the samples and he liked what I did. And he said, yeah, he offered me the book. And those samples were the first 3 pages of the story, which was Superman returning from space, from his exile. And I said, he flies in, he lands on the top of the building and everybody greets him. What if he brought something back on him, some contaminant, like the alien or something, and he infects somebody? I mean, that could be horrible. And George loved the idea. So, but my idea was something a little bit more serious and horrific. George turned it into Jimmy getting infected and becoming the elongated man. So he went in a silly direction with it. But, throughout the years, I had that kind of input. After we did the death of Superman, one of the meetings I came into with the idea, Superman's body had been put in the statue and, was in the coffin. And of course, he's come back and so the body's gone. And I said, wouldn't it be a real mind trip if they go in there and they find Superman's body still in the coffin?
Dead again.
They just went through 4 people coming back and impersonating. Now we think we got the real Superman. Is he the real Superman? Who's this in the coffin? And of course, it turns out to be a mind game by, Lex, who put like a clone, or I forget exactly what, So I threw that idea out and everybody jumped in on it. Carlin liked the idea a lot. And everybody kind of started, it becomes like a soup. Everybody starts throwing ingredients in and says, well, we'll have Lex be the one responsible. And somebody else says, oh, well, what about if we do this? And so it's a little germ of an idea that everybody gets onto. And, then we end up with a really good story.
Mr. Breeding, reading and looking back to the story, in those meetings, about all the ideas in that plot ideas, there are many or tiny references to the Bible because the encounters of the Superman or when the people see the Superman. So it was those references were natural, not biblical. Like when one read it, they say, "Oh, this is like the Bible or fragments of the Bible."
I mean, I can't speak for what other people were thinking when they wrote the stories or created the stories, but I know in the meetings, I don't recall any instance where we were like, "Oh, let's do this bit from the Bible," or "Let's make this." That the problem with Superman being who he is a lot of people infer that, the savior of Earth, and and that's never intended. It was never our intention to do that. We were never drawing those parallels. In fact, that was one of the things that I did not like about some of the recent Superman movies, is the idea that they leaned into that whole Christ figure aspect of Superman, because it just doesn't exist. I mean, people can make that connection, but that's on them. That's not something that we were trying to push or trying to say was even there. Superman, there's a scene in one of the Superman
It's a
movies.
Coincidence. It's a coincidence.
No, it's because of who he is. There are parallels to the Christ story. And so whenever you have something that may be coincidence or similar, there are a lot of people that try to assign a connection to it and say, well, it's because of this, or you're doing that, or you're trying. And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
The whole death of Superman, when it happened, everybody was like, oh, it's a publicity stunt. Oh, you're doing it to sell out. You're doing it to this. You're doing it for that. You're bringing him back. And it was like, no, the way we did the story, we were trying to do a good story. So the way we ended up coming about with the story had nothing to do with thinking about sales. Superman didn't sell. Superman was a loss leader in those days. We could not get DC to publish a trade paperback because it would not sell, in their opinion. So we were near, for those days, when I started on Superman, cancellation numbers. We're only selling about 70,000 copies a month. And I think cancellation was like 60, 65,000 or something. So you can't cancel Superman, but they ended up selling Superman as a loss leader. We stayed at 75 cents, while the other books went up to $1, $1.25, $1.50, whatever. It wasn't until Death of Superman that they realized, wow, you know, we slowly were increasing the sales. We were doing a lot of good stories that were getting attention. So sales were increasing, but Death of Superman was something no one could have anticipated. And the only reason it happened is because the media got a hold of it and they ran with it.
Yeah.
They made a big deal out of it. And speculators then jumped in, and everybody knew about it, and it became a big deal. A lot of people believe if we had the internet back then, it never would have happened, because we couldn't have kept this whole thing, you know, under wraps the way we did. And people would have, you know, been online trying to find out what's coming next, rather than just having to wait till next week to see where the story went. But you had a lot of people out there trying to say, oh, you did this on purpose. You created this. Really? Then why didn't we create it a year sooner or 2 years sooner? You know, why don't we do it every month if we have the formula for that? People are always like talking about hitting the lottery, but then when it happens, they want to give it some meaning or reason or, you know, explanation, because people don't like things that don't have an explanation. And so I think that's a lot of what the Christ comparisons are about as well, is they see that comparison and it's like, well, it can't just be, you know, coincidence, or it can't just be a similarity. We need to make this connect. We need, you know, and it just really was not there with us when we were creating the books.
You mentioned that the impact that the Death of Superman had 30 years ago, it wouldn't be the same today because of the internet. And how do you think it would be today if you, as a team, would assemble and do this event? Not again, but for the first time. Do you think it will have the same impact that it had 3 years ago?
I don't know. If the stories were all the same, I would hope that it would have a lasting impact, because they were good stories. You know, the interesting thing was Superman wasn't selling. He wasn't popular enough to, you know, to be selling regularly like many other books. People just didn't seem to care about Superman. And then when he died, all of a sudden, the real world cared. Everybody's, oh my God, they killed Superman. Oh, what is this real? What? And in the books, we ended up doing The Funeral for a Friend, which was exactly that. And we never knew when we were plotting it that it was going to so accurately reflect what went on in the real world when the book came out. That, you know, we knew these characters should care, and how it was going to affect, you know, the Superman world in the comics. But the fact that it ended up mimicking what was going on in the real world because of the death of Superman in the comics, you know, took us by surprise. I don't know if that could have happened, because the internet just has a way of rumors, and even if they're not true, I read stuff on the internet every day that everybody knows for sure, you know, oh, Zack Snyder, he's coming back to do this, and oh, this is Superman, Man of Steel is the greatest movie ever, blah, blah. And you just sit there knowing what we know from the inside and go, did they just make this up one day, or who did they get this from? You know, and they speak some of these rumors with such authority, and you're like, wow, that's really out there, but people buy into it. And that's would have happened at that time. I believe people would have heard little things, from somebody, some little thing. Somebody would have seen something in the office or a piece of art, something. There would have been rumors, speculation. Everybody would have been talking about it on the internet for the 7 days until the next book came out. And then people would be like, the rumor I heard online, I thought this was going to happen. I'm disappointed they didn't do that. Whereas back then, they had to wait 7 days to see what we were going to do. There was nobody telling them what they thought was going to happen. So even if the stories had been the same, I'd like to think that the overall reaction or the long-term reaction would have still been good. I don't think it would have been the hit. I mean, it just, the sales, people, around the block the day it came out, I'm not sure that would have happened. I'm very doubtful. But I would like to think that people would have at some point found the stories, enjoyed the stories, and started reading Superman. Because I do think that run, that whole, storyline is a very solid, piece of material.
Something that I think it would happen, that I don't know if it exists in those days, but the haters, the people being terribly mad because you guys killed Superman. Why you kill Superman? He's the greatest hero. Why did you do it? I think I don't know if that happened those days.
People received death threats. DC got death threats. And, it was I had people call my house, not death threats, but I had someone from the local power company went into the private records and got my unlisted phone number so they could call to ask for books for their son. So people were doing things out of the ordinary and, reacting to it in all kinds of different ways. I think the haters were always there. It's just they didn't have a platform to have a voice.
Yeah.
I mean, we see that here in America now with, our Donald Trump and our politics. And, there's a whole group in our society that has been quiet for so long that now has been given voice by some of the craziness. They've always been there. We just never heard them before. They never had a platform to exert their influence. And I think that's true. I think that's what the internet's done, is it's given all of the trolls and all of the crazies and the wackadoodles the platform to finally get their voice out there. And, which is fine as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Everybody's welcome to their own opinion. It's when people get crazy and people start acting upon some of that stuff and people get hurt when it's a bad thing.
Well, here we got some of your inks over Dan Jargon's. I think you did an amazing job with Cyborg Superman. I don't know if it was hard to it was too difficult, the inking of the robotic parts, because it has too many details.
I give Dan grief because that character's a pain in the butt to do. And that page especially, because once you're done, I was done doing him, I had to do the Daily Planet building. And I think it was Jerry Ordway who designed this particular look of the Daily Planet building with all these little tiles with the little flower bursts in them. So, this was all hand drawn. Today, like the most recent 30th anniversary Superman, I did a lot of this in the computer, the background, so that, you could generate it, because the deadline constraints were very tight on that book. And it was like, I got to get it done. I'm not going to have time to draw every single thing. I'll draw it, pieces of it, and then, build it. But with Cyborg, it was like, oh man, that's and my concern when I got the pencils, because I did finishes over Dan's layouts, there were no blacks, no shadows or whatever. It was just the drawing. And I looked at it and it just reminded me too much of the Terminator.
Oh,
And I thought, well, it's a cool design. I like it, but I'm afraid it's going to look too much like, the Terminator in a Superman suit. So I called Mike Carlin and I said, look, I don't know how much leeway I have on this, but on the metal parts, can I do a very heavy black sheen like it's black metal, like it's dark metal, and we'll color it gray instead of a silver metal? And he thought that was a great idea. And sometimes it gets done that way. Most of the time, I think it gets done that way. But every once in a while, it'll go through, and some, artists will do the character, or some inkers. When Dan does it, I've seen some inkers will come in and do it, and they don't realize it's meant to be, a black metal, and they'll do it more open, and then it gets colored, and it's, it's a silver robot, pieces, and it, to me, again, it looks like the Terminator in a Superman outfit.
And what about the Kryptonian one, the black suit?
The one, the Eradicator.
No. The black suit.
The black suit. I honestly don't recall whether that was designed. I think it was designed by John Bogdanov. I do remember seeing, and I still have somewhere, the model sheets where everyone would turn in their designs, and of course every week we got a package from Mike Carlin that had everything in it that came in that week, all the artwork, all the character designs, all the plots, all the scripts, so we could all be on top of everything every week. And I do recall seeing that done by John, so I think he was the one that designed that suit, but I think we were the first ones to do it, or at least Dan was always ahead on the schedule from everybody because he was very fast. And I saw, the first time I saw the black suit was not in my bundles, but was on pages from Dan for the issue where he appears in it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's very simple, and it's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very cool.
And here I got something that you did with Dan for the Wizard magazine.
Yeah, Wizard.
Amazing.
I got it right here.
Yes.
It's an amazing.
I see these at conventions all the time. I have to sign them. They're a pain to sign because everything's so dark because of the foil.
It's all foil.
Yeah, I wish they had just done a regular cover because I think the artwork just muddies up with the way they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's so beautiful. It's amazing. It's so beautiful. It's an amazing cover. I wish this cover would have been used in one of Superman's book on a trade paperback. I don't know. It would have been cool because it's very rare here. I only have this. But it's amazing.
I don't know who owns the cover. I mean, as far as the rights to publishing it, it might be Wizard commissioned it, and so we couldn't. DC may not be able to reprint it because it somehow belonged to Wizard. I don't know. I don't know how that works. But yeah, it was a fun. I mean, the interesting thing about that time is all of the extra projects we were doing while doing the regular books, because I know I was doing stuff for licensing and marketing, and Mike Carlin would be like, oh, because they knew I could finish it, they knew I was detail oriented, and I would make sure details were right. So all of a sudden I started doing house ads and Wizard ads and covers for other books and stuff for licensing, and I was like doing all for a couple of months. I was almost as busy doing that as I was doing the regular work. It was a crazy time. I was buried in work, and I was like, oh man, I'm never going to be able to come up for air.
And there was this thing that we have here on the channel also, Jerry Orway, John Bogdanov, and they both told us that when you were doing the death of Superman, it was done because the plans for marrying Lois and Clark was taken for the TV series. And I think there were some cameos from you and the Superman team on the Lois and Clark series.
TV show.
Also,
Yeah, one of
am I
our
right?
what? Yeah, so one of there's a trading card set that they did, and you can see me and my wife standing. There's a card of Mike Carlin. We're pointing up at Superman, and I'm standing behind him in a green jacket. You can kind of see, I'm a little cut off, and Denis Rodier is back there with us as well behind Mike. DC took us out to California for, I think, 2 weeks or pretty close to it for a story meeting so that we could spend time, doing one of our summits out there, and to meet the producers of the show who offered to let us be extras on an episode. So we got to go out to the Warner Brothers studios a couple of times, once for the meeting and then another day to spend on the set and meet the actors and, get ready and do all that kind of stuff and stand around. And one of the things they had us do was stand out on the street as Superman supposedly flying in the street above us. We were all supposed to oh, look, there he is. Well, there's nobody there. So the producers filming this came up and they wanted to get a shot of Dan Jurgens and me together and have us go, oh, there he goes, and I think we did a couple of takes. Well, it never got used. And I think the reason is later when I saw something from it, and I can't remember where, if Mike got copies to share with us, but Dan is like, oh, there he is. And I'm like, there he is. And we're pointing at different spots. So obviously it didn't work. So with Carlin, I think that one shot that makes it into the trading card, he's pointing up and we're all kind of pointing up in the same direction, but he's the only one where you see his face and where he's looking. So, even if the fingers are kind of in the right spot, if one guy's looking this way and the other guy's looking that way, it doesn't work. And then the other scene that we did was he lands and I think they're giving him some kind of a key to the city, and we were all standing in a group and listening to this, and we were supposed to cheer and clap. So when they show that crowd, if they pan through it, I know you prominently see John Bogdanov because he has his son Kal-El, who was only like 9, I believe, at the time, sitting on his shoulders. And so, and a couple, I think Roger Stern's got a clear shot, and a few people made it in more so than others. But it was a fun afternoon. I got to stand next to Terry Hatcher and Tracy Scoggins, and the guy that plays, I can't remember the gentleman's name. He's passed away now, but the gentleman that played Perry White were all standing over by us.
Lance Smith.
Pardon?
Lance Smith.
Oh, is that it? Okay. Yeah, but he was, like I said, and you're standing around in Hollywood. I mean, you're going to tape for 5 minutes and you stand around for an hour. So you're outside standing and the weather's beautiful, but it was kind of cool. It was a lot of fun. And I don't know, up here on my wall, let me move my camera. You see that Superman banner?
Yeah.
The banner from that episode. That was a prop. They had a whole bunch of them. And when we were done for the day, they let us take them. So I took a couple, and one of them so that's a prop from that episode of Lois and Clark.
Oh my God!
That cameo always reminds me that the series was a pioneer from doing cameos, because today it's something that it was
it's regular.
I don't know. It was used a lot by, for example, Stan Lee was the one who made it popular. The cameo of the writers, the artists of the comic books. But you guys were there, and it's amazing. It's amazing that you guys have the chance to be on the show, and almost like a sign of affection for the whole team, for
I think it's
all
also
you have done for Superman.
it was certainly a perk to the team. DC set that up for us. I think the producers of the show were trying to be very friendly and keep a very good relationship with DC, when the show was getting up and started. So I don't know whether they offered it. I mean, Mike Carlin would know all the details about this, but DC was really good about sending us places and doing all these cool little things that had nothing to do with specifically creating the book, but they were like little rewards, the little thank yous, and that was certainly one, because we did that. And then we drove, some people took the train, but a whole bunch of us took 2 vans, and we drove from the Los Angeles, from the movie set and our summit meeting, down to the San Diego comic book convention. And we're at that show for like 4 or 5 days. So that's why we were there for like almost 2 weeks. And, so they treated us very well. But a few years before that was a television show, Superboy.
Yeah.
And Mike Marlin and Andy Helfer wrote, a number of the episodes, and Mike was involved and whatever. And they ended up inviting us down. That was where our very first Superman Summit was held, was in Orlando, Florida. And so we did that for several days in a hotel conference room. And then they sent us to the movie studio, which was on the lot of Universal Studios. And they gave us all wardrobe and, made us all up. And we got to be extras in a scene of that. And much more obscure. They had, was it Dan Jurgens and John Bogdanov as painters painting in the painting a wall. And Jerry Ordway, I believe, was at a desk talking to someone. And Roger Stern and I forget who else were walking onto an elevator. So basically the characters were coming up an elevator and moving through the sets. And we were scattered in the background throughout. There are no lines or anything. We're just there. And I think those things are perks for the fans. They're like little Easter eggs. Easter eggs are a big deal in the movies. They're sticking all kinds of things in there that they know only the fans it's going to mean anything to. So certainly they could have gotten better extras to act in their movie. But, for the fans of the books and the show, they might, wait a minute, that's the guy that does this, or that's the Superman crew. So it's a fun little thing. But they were always doing, one year we had meetings in New York, and Jeanette Kahn took us all out to see Cats on Broadway as a group, and then took us out to dinner to a nice restaurant. And it was just, they treated us very, very well. And it was such a wonderful time. And, I tell Mike and the other guys, I said, as much fun as it was, and then there were some egos and sometimes some difficult times in the meetings, as you had people that were, trying to get things they wanted to do in their books and stuff. There's nothing big, nothing, that was lasting or whatever. But the camaraderie of us all hanging out together after the meetings was the best time. Those are the memories that I have the most. Those are the things that I remember. The laughing and the jokes and the sheer fun of the stuff that we did together as a group.
And then you can do it again when you go to the conventions nowadays, right?
If you're lucky enough to do a convention where they have a group of us there, yeah, I mean, it's like no time has passed, And of course, with Facebook and stuff, we can keep in touch a little bit through that, you'll come across people, or if you need to reach out to somebody, I keep in touch. I mean, I'm working with Dan Jurgens regularly these days on a lot of stuff, comics from Marvel covers and stuff. And then we did the anniversary special last year. And, I talk to Mike Carlin a couple times a year. When I got to California, I see Mike, and I see Jerry Ordway a couple times a year, hang out with him. We're good friends. I like to think I'm friends with everybody. There's nobody to work with on the books that I don't like and enjoy seeing. So there's a convention here every year in the summertime called Terrificon, and it's a great comic book show. It also has celebrities, but it's one of the few shows that manages to blend celebrities and comic books together without hurting one or the other. And there are so many creators that Mitch Halleck brings into the show that it becomes like a reunion every year. It's like, oh, I haven't seen him in how many years? And this year, he's got, for the first time, I've been doing it for several years, and this is the first year that Walt and Louise Simonson will be there. And I don't know how Superman books will be there, but, it's always fun to see them. I'm hoping there'll be other Superman people there. Because it's, Dan Jurgens and Jerry Ordway will be there. So we hang out together and do dinner and stuff. But having Louise there and maybe, a couple of other people will be there as well. It'll be a little mini reunion. So
it's such it's such a good feeling that you hearing you speak about your bonding with your partners, with your co-workers, that it's something that we imagine that it was like this, but while you're telling us it's something so good,
so
beautiful, so beautiful
to us.
I don't know if everybody else feels about it the same way I do. I mean, some of them might go like, "What's Breeding's problem, man?" I hated having the board area. I don't think that's the case because, like I said, we still are friends. We get along, and when Dan and I just did a show a month or so ago in Richmond, sat next to each other on the floor, did dinner together every night. We had a great time. We had laughs. We had, conversations about what's going on. Dan's a little more a lot more tied into comics. He's still doing regular work for DC and stuff. And, and so you hear some of the stuff that's going on and, talk about the old days, find out things I never knew about before and talk about the things we did and, laugh about some of it, cry about some of it, but I think we all do feel very fortunate that we were a part of that because it was something very unique in our industry, something that is not going to happen ever again that I would ever anticipate. I mean, the companies just aren't the companies. Marvel and DC are not the same companies anymore. They aren't interested in, doing the kinds of things, sending us all somewhere as a group or, they just the people aren't there anymore that were there that had that same sensibility, about supporting the group and allowing those things to happen and that type of camaraderie and that type of energy to flourish. I mean, they weren't stupid by letting us do all that. They let us, work well together and they mined gold from it, because we enjoyed working together and we did good work together. So
exactly, that was why the team works.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, nowadays, I don't know. I'm kind of, I do stuff here and there, but and I know people that are working, regularly or semi-regularly, and I don't hear anything that comes even close. Some people, they just work and they don't ever see the people or talk to the people they're working with, and the deadlines are nuts. We got this thing coming in next week. They'll call you on Friday or write you. Nobody calls anymore. It's all email. I of all the people that I've worked for in the last 5 years, I've only met in person one, and I've only spoken to two on the telephone. So it's crazy. They're just an email that comes through. And, you don't have that sense of being part of something. It's just work. It comes in, it's got to be done. You get an email on Friday saying, can you do this cover? We need it Wednesday, but the artist hasn't penciled it yet. Well, when am I going to get it? And it's just there's the schedules are not managed well these days, and it's a difficult business now. And I'm sure it had its difficulties all along, but it definitely is very different, especially for those of us. The kids working in comics today don't know what they missed out on. I've heard some people recently say, "Oh man, I loved it. This is great working in comics," and we're like, "Man, if only you knew what it was like 25, 30 years ago, when we were in it, it was like, it was so much better." And I'm sure to some degree at the time we were like, "Oh boy, this sucks. Why this shouldn't be this way, but you look back, I guess pretty much as you get to be an old man, you look back at everything and go, oh, those were the days, those were the good days. But with the Superman team, that's very true.
And
Yes.
you were such a nice guys that
See, I got you fooled.
you
So
were
they got invited.
You were invited to the Superman wedding.
Yeah, I was there. I was the guy that wanted to speak up when they said, if anybody has a reason they shouldn't get married, let him speak now or forever hold your peace. And as I started to raise my hand and speak out, Dan Jurgens hit me with a Bible and knocked me down. Lois and Clark are married because Dan stopped me from speaking up.
There was also a nice gesture from the comic book, because there was I think it's Kal-El, John Bogdanov's son there also.
Yeah, I think that's him, although I didn't realize he had red hair. So I think the colorist maybe got that wrong. But yeah, everybody's there if you know who they are.
Yeah. We always when we speak with Superman, with people who worked on the Superman team, we show this picture because it's something so beautiful, that a good homage, a good gesture from the book to the Superman team that worked so hard for so many years and gave us so many good stories.
Yeah, you were there.
I'm gonna to finish the interview. I'm gonna show one comment from Metro Comics. It's a YouTuber known here in Argentina, who says, "Hello, Brett. Thanks for being part of one of the best comics I ever read in my life."
Well, that's nice. You're welcome. We did it just for you. It was all for you, and we're so happy that you enjoyed it. Our work is done.
Would you work on Superman if, as a monthly title, if imagine that Dan came up with the idea and says,
Bring
"This
back
is
all the teams."
offer me the title of Superman again," would you come back to work with him with the actual with the today deadlines?
I don't know. I don't work as fast as I used to, although I work more consistently. I always had struggled with deadlines back in the day, but I could make up time very quickly. Now I'm much more steady. I tried very hard never to miss a deadline. And the Death of Superman anniversary special last summer took so much time. We were away on a family trip till the end of June 29th, and I finished the book around the 25th of August. And in that time, I only left my house 4 days. I was working 7 days a week trying to just stay on top of the work and trying to do the best job that I could. And I was like, when I look back, it's like a blur. And I don't know that I want to do that, because when we worked on the books, I always had 4 weeks. That was a given, and that was the way comics were structured. And of course, I would struggle with trying to stay on top of my deadlines then, and I'd be doing some other things, covers and other pieces here and there, but still it felt like a lot of work. To do a full book now, knowing the problems that the companies have maintaining a schedule, they don't seem to be able to deal with anything until it's what's on their plate, until it's the one in the hot seat. I would not want that constant pressure from month to month. If you're talking about, if we could get Mike Carlin back as editor, and I know that won't ever happen, so I'm safe saying this, but if Mike Carlin were to come back as editor, because I know Mike could control the schedule, and I know Mike knows what he's doing. And if you did, Mike, if you're listening, I promise you, I would not be your deadline problem these days. And working with Dan, who's always got the stuff there when it needs to be there, I would consider it. So the reason I wouldn't want to do it has nothing to do with working with Dan or working on Superman. Those are the things that would make me want to do it again. But the environment of, comics today, working on anything regular just doesn't appeal to me. Like I said, right now I'm doing stories here and there, doing a number of independent projects, doing regular covers or semi-regular with Dan for Marvel. So they pop up when they pop up, and it's, it's one and done, and then another one will show up. I just today got the first page on a 4-page Captain America story that Dan's doing and penciling that I'll be inking, Captain America number 750. Little 4-page story. I guess it's an anniversary issue of some kind. So those kinds of things I enjoy doing. And then, I'm doing more and more conventions. And I do private commissions. And, all those things keep me as busy as I want to be.
You have to come to Argentina, Mr. Reading.
If there's a convention down there that wants to bring me, they just need to reach out and talk to me. I'm always open to doing, shows in South America. I've never had a bad experience there, with the fans or the shows. The people there have been fantastic. So, Argentina, and everybody tells me about this big show in Brazil, and I'm like, everybody I know is gone, and I'm like, man, how have I not gotten invited to this thing yet? But I hear that's a good show, and I have somebody in Peru that reached out to me not that long ago, and then they went away. So I don't know what happened with that. So it seems like Superman's popular everywhere down there.
Here in Argentina, it's a big hit. It's a really big hit, like, of course, Batman.
Yeah.
But here is a very big hit. Here in Argentina, we have a comic convention called Crack Bam Boom.
Crack Bam Boom.
Eduardo Rizzo is behind that project, so they came a lot of artists. It's entirely comics, pure comics.
Oh wow!
No cinema, no film, no TV series, no nothing.
Yeah,
everything is comic book.
Sorry, celebrities for us.
Yes, celebrities for us. Comic book guys.
Comic book guys like us.
Yeah.
But
that's becoming a dying breed these days. Up here in the States, I keep going to more and more shows that keep calling themselves comic conventions. And then you get there and you find out they're actually pop culture events. And, you've got people wrestling in the back of the room, and the whole other side is celebrities and stuff. And the comics are almost an afterthought. So,
no, here
sounds like a wonderful show.
Here's pure comics, because they came here, artists from our country, Argentinian artists, pencilers, inkers. Everyone they're all gathered there.
Oh wow, that sounds great. Yeah, it's they ever want to get in touch with me, they just reach out to my email address, and I'll tell them what we need to do. But I would be open to doing something like that at some point. So, and I love the fact whenever I come down there, almost all of you speak English. I speak no Spanish. I just was horrible at languages in school. I mean, hola and gracias. And I try to pick up, my wife knows a little bit more than I do. And, I try to say thank you and certain things in the native language when I'm there, just as a sign of respect. But I always feel like really bad when I go somewhere and I don't speak I'm in someone else's country and I don't speak the language. But you make it all so easy on us because you all learned how to speak English so well that it takes away that barrier of traveling down there. So
first, now that you mentioned, I'm gonna apologize for Mario.
Yes. Sorry about our English.
How we
Sorry,
speak English. Sorry, pardon our English, sir. It's a very...
you guys are doing fantastic. I don't know if you've ever met Luis Jose Garcia Lopez.
Yes, of course. He came to that Crack Bam Boom on 2018. 2018.
I mean, he's like one of my idols. He's like, since I was young, I couldn't wait to work with him. And now I've worked with him on a lot of licensing work and have become friends with him. He's just a lovely, lovely man. But when I speak to him, he's always apologizing for his English. And I'm like, yes, there's an accent, but I understand your English just fine. You're doing great. If I speak Spanish, it's going to sound like, gibberish. It's like past hola and gracias. You're like, forget it. So please don't apologize. You guys are doing just great.
Well, we're gonna thank you, sir, because it was a real pleasure to have you here on Protagonistas del Cómic. I really appreciate that you have considered to be here and you have accepted to be here, because we love your work, we love what you've done, and you gave us lots of great comics.
Well, thank you. It's always nice to hear that that you have fans, that people enjoy what you're doing, and I am always in awe of it, because I just sit here and I do the stuff for myself, and then when you hear that it actually reaches out, touches somebody else, it's just another level of reward for doing what we do.
Yes, so Mr. Breeding. As I always say to everyone who came here to the show, I say thank you, because you are the real heroes. Because I know Batman, Superman, but you are the real heroes, because you, with your stories, we learn to read, we learn a lot of things about things, to discover a lot of universe, characters, and that's all thanks to you. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, because this is all the stories about Superman and this run and that you participate are very touching to us, because I always remember when I was a little kid and my father go to the newspaper shop and pick one of Superman or Batman or whatever. But thanks to you. Thank you, Mr. Breeding. Thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me on. Sorry that it's taken so long to get this to work out, but I'm glad it did, and be happy to, come back anytime and do it again if you want. And hopefully it'll be an easier time setting it up the next time around.
Please don't go, Mr. Breeding. We're gonna say goodbye. And
bye.
In our language. In our language.
Okay. Muchas gracias a todos los que estuvieron ahí en el chat. Les agradezco de corazón. Tuvimos acá a Mr. Brett Breeding. Un lujo, un honor tener a Brett Breeding. Por favor, dejen su like, suscríbanse al canal, apoyen este contenido, porque
por favor,
es algo que se hace con mucho sacrificio. Muchísimas gracias, Mario, por estar siempre ahí y por apoyar este contenido.
Siempre vamos a estar ahí.
Ser mi wingman, como diría.
Siempre. I'm your wingman. I'm your wingman.
Así que muchísimas gracias. Nos estamos viendo, gente.
Chao.
Adiós.
Nos vemos.
Bye bye.